Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Kilger. I'm the managing editor for Feed and Grain magazine and the host of the Feed and Grain podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today as we take a deep dive into the issues affecting the feed manufacturing, grain handling, and all the allied industries that we work with. Today, I'm speaking with Lanny Smith, Global Sales Manager for Viacam Waters. This is actually the second part of my conversation with Lanny. The first part covered some of the history of mycotoxin testing and why it should be formed at grain handling and feed facilities. This part will dive deeper into mycotoxin testing regulations, trends that he's seeing out there, and of course, consumer pressure for more testing. It's a great show, and I hope you like it. Before we start, if you're listening to this podcast in a podcasting app, please rate us and subscribe. Helps us out a lot. If you're listening online, sign up for the Feed and Grain newsletter, Industry Watch, to see the latest podcasts and stay up to date on all the latest news from around the industry. Now, on to the show. How does regulatory oversight and international standards play a role in addressing this kind of mycotoxin contamination? Because from what I can see, it's almost everyone's kind of not really that sure of what should be regulated, and it almost seems like with the technology you guys are producing, you can go, above what's required by at least the US government.
Oh, most definitely, yes. And that's a big gray area. When we're out talking to customers and prospects, and they don't have any instrumentation or don't have anything to test for these mycotoxins, is them saying, "Well, what do I have to look for? Where is the regulation? If I find it, when is it too much?" And there is the USDA and the FDA both have regulations on some of the mycotoxins, but aflatoxin, especially because it's the most predominant of the mycotoxins out there. Anytime you talk mycotoxin, the first thing comes up is aflatoxin.
Well, it's got that scary thing where it's more deadly than cyanide gram per gram or something like that. So it's that flashy headline.
Yes, yes, yes. At a high level, yes. Yeah, to animals, to dogs, to pets. Aflatoxin is very, very dangerous. And so the government regulates aflatoxin in the United States at 20 part per billion. Aflatoxin, kind of get a little deeper, is made of four components: B1, B2, G1, G2. There's four components that make up aflatoxin. The B1 is the most toxic of the four, and international export, they're going to want to know that B1 number. So that's why a lot of samples, when they go export, have to go to a certified laboratory to be tested on an instrument that can get those four separated out. So we have that, but then when you get into vomitoxins, ochratoxins, or some of these other ones, it's just kind of a said number. It's really not documented. It's not like aflatoxin. So the regulation and the oversight of this is, we have it, but when you look at the volume of customers and grain elevator stuff, the USDA, the FDA really have to have a lot of auditors out there making sure. It's right now it's kind of just like, you need to be proactive. You need to be testing for this, and finding the levels and writing your own SOPs to say that I'm not going to use this in a feed source or whatever if it is above this certain number. But there are some guidelines in place to help these organizations, these customers, companies, to figure out what they need to do. We're a little different. The EU really has a lot tighter regulations on mycotoxins and pesticides, and a lot of your allergens and stuff that are definitely in peanuts and corn and the other toxins that are out there besides mycotoxins. And it seems like a lot of that, especially allergens, that say, you can't have this, can't have that. They're always adding to the list, and at the what level. But mycotoxins sometimes get passed up a little bit. And I think it's going to start growing, almost like what you said, 13 years ago, the technology now is so much bigger. Regulation's getting better as we go. And you talk to customers, oh, we don't want regulation. That means I have to test, I have to spend money. And yes, you do, but we got to keep things safe. And my perspective as being a person that sells these, yes, I want you to be proactive and use these instruments and this technology. But the technology's got so much easier that it's not a chemistry set anymore. It's very, very easy to use. Anybody can be trained to use these lateral flow readers and the strips, and it's just very easy. And that's part of it, is it needs to be efficient, needs to be sensitive and low variability and ease of use. So we're getting there, and I think as that comes forward, so does regulation with it.
Yeah, and I mean, regulation or not, right? It's all about accountability because there is an issue. It won't be the government necessarily that you have to deal with. It might be your customers who are quite upset with you.
Right. And, good example is pet food companies and the aflatoxin that could be in the corn that goes into the dog food. And if it's at a high level and not caught, you have dogs dying. And that is, that can cost you a lot of money as a pet food company or whatever. And even in, say, peanuts and making peanut butter, making anything, you darn sure don't want a lot of highly contaminated talc in your products so it's again, like we said, it's kind of a safeguard. It's an insurance policy. It's ease of mind, and that you're doing your due diligence and the best you can do to make sure we have safe products and safe food. And if you know the background of how a mycotoxin works, it's not grain comes in, corn comes in, a 900 bushel on a semi load. There might only be 100 kernels in that, billions of kernels in that truck that actually has aflatoxin in it. Can you detect it? Yeah, you can detect it, but you have to be able to probe it and find it. And that's impossible sometimes. So through the blending and that gets dumped, it's probably, you will never find it. But you hear the stories of, well, we did a ton of testing and we still have it. Well, it might be going back and looking at what your protocols are on sampling or sampling more, grinding more to catch that. Sometimes you could grind that whole load and maybe not find it. It's just the nature of the animal. It is hard. And the USDA even says it in their manual of how to probe and try to get a representative sample of the full lot that you're looking at it can be tough. And it's time consuming and it can be costly.
Yeah, exactly. Which in sometimes I don't think people usually expect us to catch everything, right? They just really want proof that you're at least trying. You need that documentation like, oh no, we did it. We sampled the right way and we tested. We still missed it.
Yep, followed protocols and it happened. Like I said, it's kind of ease of mind that I'm doing everything I possibly can to produce and sell a safe and efficient product.
Well, luckily, I mean, it's getting easier and easier every year to do your own in-house testing and at least have that baseline. What are the emerging trends and advancements in the field of mycotoxin management, especially ones that can significantly affect the cost of it for grain elevators and feed manufacturers? Because it seems like it's getting better all the time and easier all the time, at least to me, a layman looking in from the outside.
As a manufacturer, we have to listen to our customers and we have to listen to what they say. And especially the ones that are really wanting to do a great job at testing and make sure they have a safe product, but they still want something that's cost effective, that isn't extremely expensive to the point to where in their budgets they have to cut back and that's affecting food safety. So we take that into account as we produce test kits, is that little machine has to be very reasonable priced, and the life of that machine can be years, and those test kits have to be, per test has to be cost effective and affordable. So we'll do the test, but then it also has to be very efficient. It has to be sensitive and it has to give you an accurate reading, and which are guidelines from the FGIS as far as what our test kits have to do and how much variability. If it says it'll read 2 part per billion and it's 2.1 or it's 1.9 or whatever, you're falling within that regulation of variability and on the sensitivity. And those are things that are getting better and better, and they're getting cheaper. If you look at what it costs at a laboratory, you send a sample to a laboratory and that sample's being tested on a $300,000 piece of equipment, that test is going to be more expensive because they got to pay for that instrument, but it's a lot harder instrument to run and prep the sample and get it through the machine and get the result. That's more expensive. So on farm or at the grain location, I say the first place of contact of that grain, it has to be cost effective for that person or that farmer, grower, elevator, feed mill, food manufacturer to be able to afford that and be able to do the amount of tests that they need to do. And that's where the industry is going, I think, a lot with. We sell to, your farm, the producers, and your producers have gotten so big that they're a commercial business now. You look in the grain industry, the corn industry, you have a lot of the smaller farmers where I came from. But you're looking at most of your farmers are they're farming 3 to 8,000 acres, so they can set up a big scale house where they can do that. And we do sell to farmers where they can test it as it's coming out of the field before they ever even sell it to the grain elevator, and then it's going to be tested again. So they kind of know what's coming right directly out of field if it's not going directly to a grain elevator or feed mill as new crop. We're making it easier for those people. Look at some of the other type testing allergens. You have swipes. People can buy right from your pharmacies and stuff and do your home testing. And it's an area that we're looking into and actually talking a lot is that the general public is hearing more about mycotoxins and allergens and GMOs and you name it. And they open their cupboards up at home and look at it and go, boy, I hope that product was tested. And if they feel that they're not comfortable, they want to be able to test that at home. And that's a whole nother realm of testing and a whole nother realm of regulation, but that's coming, I think. And it's coming not so much in the mycotoxin world right now that the individual, say you at your house, at home, testing the food that's in your cupboards for mycotoxins, but it's getting there. It's getting closer to that as the ease of use and the expense cost of doing those tests. So
And there's an interest too, because if you do a Google search for aflatoxin or anything, the first questions are gonna be, is there aflatoxin in my milk? What is it? And it's all consumer-based questions rather than what it used to be, which is all commercial concerns.
right. When all this technology started booming, like I said, 10, 15 years ago, the instruments were a lot bigger. They were a little more expensive. Our instrument we have that uses with our other product is a little more expensive, and it's a chemistry set. Basically, it's a little longer process. Very, very efficient, as close as you can get to, say, HPLC testing or LCMS in a laboratory. These are instruments that the big laboratories use, and they're very efficient, very sensitive. But, we can get tests that are close to that you can use. And it's interesting where we're going and where we came from, those bigger instruments, and now we're a lot smaller, the footprint smaller. So on the consumable side, we have to be very green, that we don't want a bunch of plastic and a bunch of consumables being thrown away. We keep getting those smaller and smaller and ease of use and being able to reuse them. And that's an issue too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what advice would you give to a grain elevator or a feed manufacturer who is looking to proactively address mycotoxin contamination and its costs? And what would you say are the first steps to for them to evaluate their situation and then decide where to go from there?
There's a few steps. I think you have to look at, if it's the instance as a grain elevator, how big you are, how much volume, how many bushels per year you're going through, where it's going. Who are you selling that grain to? Are you just an elevator that you take it in and then it's shipped to a larger elevator, grain elevator, through the same company? You can do some testing, but somebody that's kind of an independent and you don't have that big backing of a corporate company, you kind of got to look at what the cost is, what's your budget, can you afford the testing, but then also on the other end, look at it and say, can I not afford it? If I don't put it in place, what's this going to cost me? And then kind of look to the volume, look to which mycotoxins you're going to be testing for. As a feed mill, dealing with many, many different ingredients, you're probably going to be dealing with more than one mycotoxin. You're going to be dealing with more than just aflatoxin. And that's something to look at too. What's the ease of doing all those other tests? Can I do all those tests with one instrument? And how easy is it to do multiple toxin tests on, say, a corn sample, a wheat sample? Like I said, especially in a feed mill where that feed ration mixture may have corn, wheat, barley, soy. And it can have a lot of different, it got some lentils in it or whatever. It could be anything now, especially when you're looking at the protein source. So what is it you have to test for? What is it you're needing to test for? What are you responsible for by, say, through the FDA and the FSMAC? My traceability. What do I need to look at to put in my SOPs that I need to test for to make sure I'm covered? So that first step kind of tells you, you list out, okay, I need to test for this, this, this. I'm selling to this company, this company. They're requiring the testing. So here's what I have to do. So you can kind of put together a little bit of a budget of what it's going to cost by volume of how many bushels you store or sell or buy, or the size of your facility, how many tons of feed you produce a year, and where you test and how much you test. And that gets into is on the feed end is you test the ingredients and do I test the finished feed product, which now we are into. by doing it by lateral flow. So you can test the ingredients. Then once they're all ground, mixed, and pelletized into a feed source, I grind that back up and test that and make sure that my mycotoxins haven't grown, or, the total number has not concentrated into a higher number. So do I need to do that? So it's not complicated. It's just a matter of looking at the size of your establishment or your company, and what you're doing and what you're testing and who you're selling to, and kind of gives you a good idea of how deep into the testing you need to go. And one of the first thing is find, like you said earlier, Google, and find the companies like Vicam that sell these instruments and can come out and demo these and talk. I can go out and talk to the customer and say, okay, well, what commodities are you testing? Where are you selling to? This is all you need right here.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys also produce a lot of great YouTube videos and things like that for people to check out, and they can see how the testing systems work and all that kind of thing, which is all great. So you can do quite a bit of research on your own and then reach out to a company like Viacam, or well, since you're here, Viacam, you'll tell them more. So that's good.
Right. Well, yeah. And like you said, the videos, it gives them an idea. Also, too, they go into this blind going, oh, is this, like I said before, a chemistry set? Do I have to go have training, or like a chemist or a microbiologist? Do I need to know how to do all this? And then you don't. You have to know why you're testing, what you're testing for, and why you got the result you got, and what you're looking for. And that's basically it. It's very simple.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. Those are all the questions I have. Anything else you feel like we missed or you want to cover?
No, we kind of hit everything. It's just, I guess, to anybody that's out there listening, just really look at where testing has come from, where it's going, and how much. I mean, like I just mentioned, we have really moved on to end use testing. So after the feed source, or ration is made, we can test that end product for all those. So we can test for aflatoxin, phimosin, DAWN in a feed sample. After you've tested all those ingredients individually, we can test it again before it ends up on farm. That's where the industry's going. It's easier. You could always do that kind of testing, but it was on a lot larger scale and more expensive. So all that is coming down. And a good example is that we can do glyphosate testing now by lateral flow. So the technology of lateral flow testing or on-site testing is opening up a lot to where you can do a lot of those big tests. Now, it doesn't take away from, like, my parent company, Waters, that sells those big instruments to laboratories, is that you still have to have laboratory testing. Through certification and stuff, you still have to send samples out. Feed mills do. If you're going to export a product, you still need to send those samples to a commercial certified lab to get those results, mycotoxin results or everything. But we can do a lot of that on site to show you where you're at before those samples have to be sent in.
A very good point for now. I think you guys are going to crack those deeper tests at the feed mill within 10 years. That's my prediction.
It's coming. Everybody, we get a lot of questions about pesticides, and glyphosate is a pesticide, comes from Roundup, but we were able to do that. But a lot of your pesticides, the molecule is so small, it has to be done on those larger instruments at laboratories. That is something that everybody's really looking at, is the pesticide testing. As more and more chemicals are used, why can't we do that on-site testing of that? Got a ways to go there, but there is smaller instruments, but they're still very expensive, talking 20, 30, 40, $50,000 to do something smaller like that. And they've got a long ways to go too. But a lot of your smaller elevators, feed mills can't afford that kind of an instrument, and I don't blame them.
Someday. I mean, it's amazing how fast this technology can evolve.
And the snowball is rolling faster and faster every year, of getting there. So it's jump on the train, it's moving faster. So
Well, it was so great talking to you today. And thank you for coming and chatting with us about kind of mycotoxins and where that part of the industry is right now. Really appreciate it. I hope you come back again someday.
yeah, I would love to come back anytime you need somebody to chat about mycotoxins or just regular testing in general for food safety. So, but Stephen, yeah, I really appreciate you the offer to Vicam and myself for coming in and kind of just chatting about some of these toxin tests, the regulations, and what we really need to take a good look at.
Bye, everyone.